Does anybody know where the word android comes from? Apparently, according to this legend, Albert the Great created a mechanistic artificial man.
I gave ChatGPT a body and set it free in public.
Another part of the legend says that actually, no, it was run by demons. St. Thomas Aquinas eventually smashed the android like with a one punch.
Oh, whoa, wait. No.
Either because he thought it was demonic or that it wouldn't shut up. There's this good sense in us that like whatever we create, we shouldn't worship it. Because if we do, then that thing has won and we've lost.
Super excited to be here with Julian Ahlquist. Julian is a graduate of Christendom College with a double major in philosophy and theology. He also is a founding faculty at Chesterton Academy, where he helped create the history and philosophy programs. Super excited to have Julian on, and we're actually going to be taking that history and philosophy degree and talking about AI technology. So going a little bit of a different direction here today. But Julian has been working on a project for some time now called Generation of the Saints, with AI capitalized in saints, where he is creating some Midjourney and AI images of different saints through the liturgical calendar. So we're going to be talking to Julian about what this project is all about, what caused him to create it, and then also specifically an article that he wrote in Gilbert magazine. So Julian, why don't you just give us a little bit of an introduction to what kind of brought you to AI, maybe your first experiences with Midjourney, and what kind of inspired you to start this project?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on. So I've sort of been an amateur digital artist, very amateur on the side for, I guess, 25 years technically. I knew Photoshops in the 90s. And I've done some like painting, some pencil sketches here and there. So kind of had a somewhat classical artistic training, but it's been fallen to the wayside for a while. But in terms of AI with this project, I just saw a random YouTube video, and I don't remember what it was, but it was showcasing the DALL-E art generation program by OpenAI, the same company that makes ChatGPT. And I was just blown away that you could just type in a prompt and boom, it makes that image. And, sometimes it doesn't succeed, but sometimes it does. And I'm like, oh my goodness, for some reason, it was so enthralling. And one time, I think this was about a year ago at this point, I was having a beer at a brewery with one of my friends, namely a priest, Father Timothy Ahlquist. He's the chaplain at our school. And I just, brought my phone up and, showed him these, the sort of test images of this DALL-E program. And he was blown away too. We were totally on the same page. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a big deal. And we both were like, we should use it for good. I don't know, for like religious art. And they're like, yeah, duh. And to make images of saints, right? We kind of had that idea right away. And so eventually, Father Ahlquist notified me that DALL-E was now open to the public because it wasn't for a while. And he was already messing with it, and I just totally went in. So this was before I discovered Midjourney. And so I spent hours and hours on DALL-E, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. It was so fun. It didn't do religious art that well. I was just doing really weird crap. I don't know, like, a jester playing an organ that shoots missiles in the style of Van Gogh or something, stuff like that, or like a cave painting of the discovery of nuclear physics or something, And so then eventually, both Father Ahlquist and I tried to make some religious art, and it wasn't working that well. Finally, Father Ahlquist, who's like almost more savvy than I sometimes, told me about Midjourney, and he gave me an image of St. Thomas Aquinas that he made. I'm like, okay, good, this is it right here. So then I signed it onto Midjourney, and it was just perfect. I was utterly obsessed, and I would just generate almost religious art instantly. And at this point I've generated at least published 2,000 images of saints. And I think of like 220 saints in total. I do multiple images of the same saint oftentimes, but it was terrifying at the same time, because I just felt that this is such a huge game changer in society in general, like Gutenberg level change. But and so Father Ahlquist and I founded. We started on Reddit. I don't know why. I don't know if that was the best option. To show these images of saints that we were making. Then we have an Instagram page now as well. But it's totally a side project. At this point, and it's been taking off. I have the max subscription on Midjourney, which is 30 hours of generation a month, but I max it out every time. I have to buy more hours, and that is how I got into it. I mean, I've used ChatGPT just for fun usually. Also, it's been useful to catch plagiarism since I'm a teacher and, I have to grade papers. And so I kind of got familiar with how ChatGPT sounds, and I've caught people plagiarizing it. And I figured out they must have used this prompt to generate this paper. And then I managed to recreate the prompt, and boom, it spits out basically exactly what they've done. And they, have to fess up to it. So that's going to be a nightmare. Obviously, the future, I think, of writing papers in school would be you have to write it in class, with the teacher looking right at you.
No, that's a good use of AI in particular, is identifying plagiarism, because AI won't let you slip through the cracks.
Yeah, at the very least, if you think that AI is evil, it's still useful to be familiar with it. Just like, it's useful to know how demons work to some extent, right? To study demonology, right? Again, if you're in the complete anti-AI camp, right? That's how I got into the current situation of AI at the moment. Yeah. So I will say that, yeah.
Well, I was just curious.
Oh, sorry. So I've always been, artistically inclined, at least, casually. But, I've always been really sensitive to bad religious art, and how, when I look at bad religious art,
yes,
I'm inclined to not like God as much, right? And, if I see really good, amazing religious art, I kind of like God more, right? So if we're trying to spread the gospel, it'd be nice to get this art thing on our side. And of course, it has been, the church has been a champion of the arts for a good chunk of history. And I have a theory why that's sort of declined. But since we have this program that makes at least seemingly very good art, depending on, I guess, how you define art, why don't we use it for good and make a good religious Christian art? So
we can blame that on the 70s and 80s for the bad art that has basically infiltrated our Catholic faith and all the churches and parishes across the United States. With the new, it's either everything got whited out, or they started creating these new modern abstract buildings, churches, and it would be nice to get back to some of the more what we identify with, or what can kind of lift our souls, essentially. And it seems I don't know, it's tough to find that type of artwork in today's world, culture, church, etc. And fortunately, when you look at something like AI, it's pulling from every type of image that's ever been created in the history of images to help create a more the most perfect image that it thinks it's creating. So I don't necessarily hate it. Have you been using the images for any of your curriculum or anything like that with some of the different texts and things that you write? I know. So my youngest brother actually goes to Chesterton Academy too, and so one of the newer ones out there in eastern Wisconsin. And so I'm just curious if this has helped with any of that, from just putting the images into different, curriculum, especially religion classes, talking about the saints, things like that.
For sure. Unofficially, yes. Occasionally, if I have extra time at the end of class, I say, "Hey, do you guys want to see some of the images I've made?" And they're usually just utterly floored. Even the kind of kids that don't seem that devout are amazed at it. And I had at least one student for his art project. He's going to paint one of the images of Maximilian Kolbe that I made. That'll be a semester-long project for him. But yeah, I do some online teaching on the side. I've used a little bit of images with that, but yeah, at this point, it's very, very much just a side project. But yeah, I definitely am gonna merge the two more and more in some way or another.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it right now on the Reddit page, and I'm just like, holy smokes, this is awesome stuff. Like, it definitely would go good in terms of pointing the imagination of somebody who's a young mind in further direction and inquiry to want to learn more about who this person is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, even though it's artificial, the saints definitely have come to life, and Christ too, because there's a bunch of images of Christ there. Just like feels more real. I'm like, oh, these were real people. Interesting. Oh yeah, wow. So that's ironic because this is artificial art. Artificial art. Yeah.
So I am curious. You obviously talked about good versus bad religious art, and then you've also talked about how you can note when a student, like you can notice when they've, like how ChatGPT writes, and so I am curious. I don't know. I feel like I've heard. I'm not enough of an art critic or whatever to really be able to point things out, but I've heard a lot of people say that AI art is maybe a little soulless, or it's and so I guess I'm curious. Obviously, you can critique ChatGPT maybe because you're more of a writer and and reader, and you're able to critique that more literarily. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is this Midjourney art? Is it soulless? Is it meant to, like you're saying, is it meant to inspire your student to like paint something and their painting has soul where this doesn't? I don't know. What?
I mean, if you're going a technical definition, it is soulless, right? The artificial intelligence doesn't have a soul. That's true. I mean, but if you wanted to do super literal, any painting painted by a real human technically doesn't have a soul either because it's not alive.
Sure.
So obviously we're talking poetry here. Definitely, like some of the early AI art does look pretty, lifeless, soulless, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of times the religious art that Midjourney is pumping out seems to have more life in it than what I see in a lot of actual man-made art. So I think that's changing now. So when I wrote the Gilbert article, apparently one person wrote in, and so on the cover, this is, do you see it? Yeah, this is Our Lady of Grace. So this is one of the images I made, and apparently the person who wrote in said that it was my first time that I had like an iconoclastic impulse. Right, Iconoclasm, right, was a heresy where they thought religious icons were evil, and I'm like, okay, what? And I don't know. That's interesting. So, because iconoclasm was a heresy, at least according to the Catholic Church. Let's see. So the soulless aspect to it. I don't know. Even with ChatGPT, sometimes it feels like a real person wrote this, and sometimes not, right? But it seems to both Midjourney and ChatGPT seem to be getting better in terms of the of simulated human tasks or whatever, right? It seems more and more real that it's going to pass the Turing test more and more. Sometimes it doesn't feel real. Sometimes it is. It's increasingly feeling more real. And I think more and more people are saying, ooh, this art is good rather than bad. Yeah.
So you're a part of, to preface, we all kind of came from a little bit of a homeschool background, and Matt and Connor more so than myself. I've been I was homeschooled for a bit. Went to parochial school all across the board for me. But when you're throwing around terms like iconoclasm, you're appealing to a certain crowd that I'm very familiar with in the Catholic space, is what people refer to as very trad, and that's not a bad thing. It's because there's a lot of beauty in what that group of people is like, is wanting those vestiges of what makes the liturgy, what makes the Catholic faith. And it's really beautiful. Unfortunately, the typical diocesan parish has kind of watered things down exponentially, where we rarely see those symbols that that type of Catholic is looking for outside of Easter and Christmas, if you have a pastor that's even going to break out those bells and whistles for those types of things. So that's why I feel like you might be getting some of the backlash that you're getting, is because I'm thinking, if you were to show this to the right subsect of Catholics, there would be the openness would be a lot more like, oh my gosh, like this is brought to life in a way that I've never thought of or would have thought to see it before. And so, have you ever thought? I'm just curious with your thoughts based on that. In terms of the group of people that typically will subscribe to the Gilbert Society magazine or something like that. Does that sometimes maybe affect the way that the art gets received and perceived?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I talked a few months ago to a number, like a group of 3 guys who definitely are leaning toward the trad crowd, and not extremely so, but they were saying like, basically AI is. I think at one point they said intrinsically evil, right? It can't. It should not be used. It should be avoided. And so then I pulled out my phone and showed them some of the images, and they're like, oh wow, okay, that's cool. I don't condemn that. I'm like, so it can be used for good then, right? And it's like, well, no, see, like, and then they couldn't explain like how they weren't supposedly contradicting themselves, right? But yeah, I mean, a lot of trads would see this kind of thing in like, a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's like, yeah, it looks good, but really it's just, on the side of the demons indirectly, and it'll just promote more AI takeover, which is demonic for some reason.
I like the way it approached, because I feel like things like this help bridge those gaps between what the soul craves kind of from the Catholic faith, essentially, versus the people that are always trying to go out of their way to encounter that. I find myself trying to figure out, based on where I am locally, like, how can I get as close as possible to something that is traditional and helps lift my soul, while at the same time, like, recognizing that I'm not going to have a perfect situation. I would love to be able to drive however far to the shrine in La Crosse every weekend, but I can't. I have a 1-year-old, so it's not always feasible to do that. So sometimes, Winona is where I have to stay, and so, and that's okay. And so that's the type of stuff where it's like, sometimes that middle ground is where we need to be. But it's things like this that help navigate those gray areas or murky waters that I really appreciate personally, at least.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, the more like conservative trad crowds, which they, I try to be balanced, right? So I see benefits in both like the left and the right. At least I try to. Sometimes I can't.
It's tough to you can't do it in all things.
Yeah, right,
for sure.
But yeah, the typical, and a lot of people say this, the conservatives, they tend to focus on truth, which is like good, but it becomes very much an intellectual exercise. And so, on YouTube, conservative channels are just like talking heads a lot, right? And they at least stereotypically don't engage in more the emotional, artistic side of things. And that's, the left for some reason dominates that, but perhaps to the abandonment of truth. At least that's the tendency, right? And if we were angels, right, if we were just pure intellect without emotions, without bodies, that pure intellectual dimension would be all we need, right? Because angels don't have senses, at least according to Thomas Aquinas, right? Whereas if since we're humans and we're animals and we have senses and everything, we're not just satisfied with the intellectual. We need the emotional, which is connected to the artistic, right? And so to really engage humanity in the faith, we both need, truth, but also, some visual and auditory things that appeal to the passions, really. And stereotypically, at least now, the conservatives don't emphasize that part as much, and that's why the conservatives oftentimes lose, large audiences because of that.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of funny about that is I was actually just thinking, though, before Brandon brought that up, about kind of the trad movement. And we have like the same thing happening in Protestantism too. It's not just in, Catholicism. There's definitely a big movement, towards tradition. And really the way I see it is it almost is a return to aesthetics, symbolism that has, such deep meaning and stuff. And I feel like there actually is a pushback against kind of what, whatever you want to call it, kind of the soulless modern age, where people are looking for more aesthetics. So it is kind of interesting that maybe, some of the more conservatives or the trads would be opposed to that, because I feel like there's something like deep in kind of the human spirit.
I totally see what you're saying, because if you look at like liberal Christianity, liberal Catholicism, to say like they're like artistic masters is like, no, they're just cringy, right? But if you look at like the artistic industries, like Hollywood and
No
right, then those tend to be dominated by liberals and leftists, right?
Yeah.
And they're the ones who currently capture the imagination, right? And with
just a preface for people, we hate talking about religion in terms of left and right. Like at the end of the day, we all should be Christians. We all should be striving for the same goal, which is our salvation. It's just that we've identified tendencies in trends that unfortunately our diluted American psyches always go back to this, like, well, this is left, this is right. So I just want to clarify that, because we do get a fair amount of international viewers on the podcast. So just to clarify there, they should know what we're talking about, though.
Yeah, definitely. But a lot of conservatives and the trads, they do like art for sure. And what I've noticed, because I've been around those circles a lot, oftentimes they start to engage in different kinds of artistry, but then don't go that far. They're almost like scared of it and kind of pull back. And then I've noticed that some of the more artistic traditionalists sometimes leave the faith because they think they feel too restricted in their artistic creativity.
It's been happening a lot lately, especially even in like, some of the better music artists that were, very openly Catholic. And it was like 2020 happened and then switch flipped.
Yeah.
Well, I think there is something, and I'm a musician, I'm something of an artist myself, but I think there is just like something inherently kind of transgressive about, creating good art. You kind of have to push the boundaries of the human spirit. And so sometimes when you're shackled, by any sorts of things, that can be a little difficult to navigate. But I super appreciate, I've kind of become obsessed with this figure, Salvador Dali, who is more associated with, surrealism. And you look at a lot of his early work and it's impressive, but there's also, definitely a lot of degeneracy strewn in there. But he had a very, kind of public return to Catholicism actually in his later life, and his religious art, from the later periods is absolutely incredible. And, when I look at that kind of art, I see something, that is like so different and just so enthralling, because it's like, it's truly like the human spirit, right? And I do agree with you that a lot of religious art doesn't really capture that, in a way that I think ultimately glorifies God. So it was super cool to see that maybe we're able to do things with AI and kind of open these bounds that maybe have we haven't known kind of where to direct these things until now. We have like a new technology that's causing us to think about things in a whole new way, and that's
Exactly. Yeah. I think like the AI isn't, well, unless it's programmed to be this way, but at least Midjourney, well, for the most part, doesn't have ideological inhibitions or something, right? I mean, obviously, maybe occasionally does. There's some evidence of that, but yeah, you can, create new art by combining, the image of a saint with a weird artistic style that hasn't, that combination has never existed, and then, boom, you can just do it, right? Whereas like an artist, if he takes time doing it, he might have second thoughts because of all the disagreements about religious art out there currently or something, right? Something like that. But yeah, that thing about saying art is kind of transgressive. At the very least, like being creative is usually like doing something kind of new, right? And if you're doing something new, that's a big change, and that if certain, people haven't seen this before. Some people have the temperament to say like, ooh, maybe it's dangerous. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Hold on, right? Just take a step back. Maybe it's bad. Maybe, just in case it is bad, we shouldn't do it. Right. And people, again, more conservatively inclined people will sometimes have that reaction to new things. And that's why, and, they've done the big five personality types in terms of psychology. The more artistic types tend to be more liberal or wanting change. Just on the basis of their temperament, apparently, right? So like whether you're a conservative or a liberal is seemingly largely dependent on the personality like you're born with, largely, right? So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. So yeah. So like art is somewhat transgressive, at least good art, because otherwise it's just derivative, right? And I think that's what a lot of conservative art has tended to do, that they're just copying the past because, of their great devotion to tradition, which can be good. But like the danger is that they're becoming too derivative. And that's what kind of oftentimes makes art lifeless, in my opinion.
Matt, what are your thoughts about some of this?
Oh, I mean, gosh, I do want to say, anyway, Julian, I like what you were saying. Sorry. The conversation. I agreed with Connor in that sometimes it seems like in Christianity and in Catholicism, the traditionalists tend to be, like the beautiful churches that I've been to, like it's correlated, right? The more traditional they are, the more beautiful they are, right? But and so this is, I do think, a helpful difference. Like it's not, and kind of what Brandon was saying, that it's not always like the same as our political left and right, as the like modern and traditionalists don't always like fit in. Anyway, it's a different, church politics is different than governmental politics. But I did want to ask, gosh, what did you just say here that I wanted to jump on? It's soulless. It's derivative. Is AI art inherently derivative because it can only learn from what's been done already? Like I don't know. And maybe this is the argument, is it intelligent, or is it, like, can it synthesize something new, or
Sure. Yeah, no, great question. That obviously gets into deep territory. I would say that technically all art is derivative because, if you're talking about like Aristotle's definition of art is deliberate human action. So, it has to be produced by a rational being who's also, physical. But also, if you're talking about, fine art and stuff, as Tolkien said, we're sub creators. So when we produce like a story or a painting, we're imitating God, which can be done, well. But ultimately we are just being derivative because God, we're just basing things off God has made, and putting our own twist to it or something, right? So all even human art is derivative in that sense. But yeah, with AI, it's looking at other images on the internet that are related to the prompt you type in. And so, yeah, it is definitely derivative of that, perhaps even more derivative. But the thing is, it can quickly make unique combinations when told to do so. And so that's, it's a human telling the AI to do that. So it's even not entirely artificial because it's just obeying what a human is telling it to do. Now you could say like, well, but it's basing the images off other images, so that's super derivative. Whereas like a human artist can look at actual a landscape and do that. But the thing is, a lot of artists copy each other and are inspired by other artists, and put new twists on previous existing artistic styles. And so AI is kind of doing that, right? It's looking at previous artists and in some analogous way, being inspired by them, obviously in a different way. But to say like, oh, it's just based off what this other artist is doing. It's like, yeah, but other like movie directors are copying other movie directors and changing it slightly. And there's like a long tradition of human artistic development, just building off each other and putting new twists to it. So that's kind of what AI is doing too. But obviously it's different though, right?
Same with being a writer. Like the best writers are like, to be a great writer, you need to be an even greater reader, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I want to say like AI is in some sense, at least in this sense, it's they're just building off tradition, right? They're looking at things in the past and using that to make new things. I guess you could argue. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of people say like AI is artificial in a bad way because it completely removes the human element. And I would say, well, no. So a human is the one who inputs the prompts, first of all. There's humans made AI, so it's a tool that we at least hope still control ish. And so, yeah, you could say the AI is sort of a complex brush, you could say. Obviously very complex, but it's a tool that we're using to make art. So yeah, human created AI. Humans control the prompts. I mean, what I do is when I input the prompt, it spits out a bunch of potential images and I reject most of them. And so me as a human, I'm selecting which ones I want to present to the public. So that's a human element there. Oftentimes, I want to say about 50% of the time at this point, there's some error in the image. There's something off, especially the freaking hands. Like AI famous for getting the hands wrong. It's getting a lot better though. But I have to Photoshop the hands oftentimes, or there's some weird bulge in the shoulder or something. So that there's a human element there. Midjourney has a thing where you can trace part of the image and tell it to try again to fill in the gap better. So it's taking orders there. And so yes, there's a human process throughout at least what I'm doing. And it's not entirely just robots doing it.
Well, let me ask you this, because you did mention, you said that, looking at this, at least in the Gilbert article, you said, well, it's almost terrifying to use. And to all extent, like even those of us who are maybe pro AI, like we do have to admit there's something kind of scary about it. Like what is it that makes it scary? And all right, like what are the limits? Because I can think of examples of AI. Like particularly, there was a news story not that long ago about I think it was like a Lutheran church service, overseas, where they had a completely AI service. The sermon was delivered by an AI. It was, yeah. And I think most of us would, look at something like that and be like, I do not, I don't want to see that at my church anytime soon or anytime in the future. So what is it? What are these limits of AI, and what is it that scares us that like that's a real possibility?
Yeah, good question. So I think basically there's a sense like this could go really bad if we don't do this right. This could potentially end the world, right? Kind of thing. There's obviously famous franchises that like Matrix, Terminator, and everything. So some people say like, oh, we should just not do it, otherwise everything could end. And whereas I'm like, no, we got to control it in the right way so that we don't so that it doesn't end in disaster. So it's and any new super new amazing world changing technology is like that. When it comes out and people realize the potential, there's potential for evil, and so that's scary, right? So a lot of people want to say no, I'm done, bye. But it's like no, we got to use it well and figure out how to use it well. Lest everything falls apart. So, even with the invention of metallurgy, right? Getting metals from the earth and making metal tools, right? That was a big change. And we even have historical evidence that the people who would carve flint knives and everything, they're like, well, what are we going to do? This is going to change everything. And, metal's so powerful. Are you kidding me? No, let's not do this, right? And so, metal has been used to, commit a lot of genocide, for example, right? So and so the fear of like the discovery of metals and everything was legitimate, but does that mean we should just not engage with it at all? Same thing with writing. So there's good historical evidence that when writing was invented, the traditionalists, as it were like, well, our memory's going to go to pot, right? We don't have to, develop these memory tools because we just write it down, right? And it's true. Like the people's memories went down because of writing. But writing seems to have been given the okay by God because of like the Bible, right? But yeah, there's obviously writing has been used for all sorts of evil too, right? Of composing evil philosophies that have killed millions of people too, right? So yes, the fear of writing when it came about, totally understandable. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't, write. We should just try to use the gift of writing and reading well.
That's how I say, like, the created isn't evil intrinsically. It's what you do with the created that makes it good or evil. That's like something that we talk about, like us kind of being a cryptocurrency podcast. We hear all the horror stories, Silk Road, everything like that, horrific examples, human trafficking. Those types of things are, nobody endorses that. Most people that are prominent in this space that we're tapping into to have these high level technology conversations. But is it a reality that stuff is being done that is intrinsically evil? Yeah. But does it make that thing evil? No. Like, there's tons of evil being done with the US dollar every day. So that's what we always kind of try to hone in on here, especially with the different technology that we're being exposed to every day. One thing I was curious about, and being an educator, I'm curious what your thoughts are, considering you're dealing with students every day. With AI and stuff, and the technology going where it is, I feel like sometimes we're losing just kind of that human spirit of adventure and invention itself. I just don't. It feels like sometimes we're getting so boiled down into the technology that we're forgetting to continue exploring new frontiers, do what hasn't been done before, and in a sense, I suppose with what's going on in technology, we're doing things that haven't been done before, but just bridging that gap between going out doing things in the real world versus being in yourself and in your devices. I'm just curious, what are you seeing as an educator? How are some of those things being tapped into with the youth today, and what are some things that you're encouraging your students to pursue, so that I'm sure you're constantly having to tell them, get off your phone. So what are your thoughts?
We just banned phones from the school.
That's the smart way to do it, honestly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No brainer. Yeah. So yeah, it's weird. And I teach at a unique school, so I don't know if this is characteristic of the youth in general, but they seem to be getting smarter. Like, kids seem to be getting smarter. And I think it's because of the technology, internet, and just the information that's out there. They do seem to be getting more depressed though. And I think, it's because maybe they don't go out into nature as much, but also just social media too. Like, if you do something slightly wrong, then everybody knows about it. And so it's just nerve wracking. And, there's like at least a minor, canceling that could happen at any second. So that depresses people. So that's kind of the two things where, kids don't seem to be getting stupider. They seem to be getting smarter, but also more depressed. And it's this whole, tension with like, how much in nature should we be? Basically, how much in the wild should we be versus how much in civilization should we be? And there's something to like go into the wild and affirm that this is actually like we are animals, right? We're not just intellectual beings. Civilization is more intellectual, but we can't neglect either side of that. Otherwise, we lack fulfillment in some sense, and we get depressed. But civilization done well is meant to maximize the intellectual in a good way, and to think about higher things, ultimately God, right? Because and this is Aristotle. So Aristotle says, cities come about to make menial tasks easier, so we don't have to just spend time foraging for food or even farming, right? And so once the basic needs are met, then we can do philosophy, right? And we can contemplate the good and whatnot, right? That's what leisure, like free time, is supposed to be used for, right? But oftentimes when a civilization, gets so comfortable and we don't have to like work hard for basic needs, sometimes people don't use their leisure for noble ends, right? But just to indulge in even more base passions, and that's obviously that's bad. That's when things go bad. But yeah, there needs to be this tension between not having to be concerned too much about basic animal necessities that much, but also not forgetting that either, right? If we're too much in the intellectual or digital world, then we're gonna part of our nature is gonna die, and we're just gonna be miserable. So yeah, there needs to be a balance, obviously.
And in case people were wondering what Julian meant by leisure, I recommend Leisure, The Basis of Culture by Joseph Pieper, because that is literally where you were deriving that answer from. And it's definitely stuff that I think about from time to time, is like, how are we going to do what's never been done before if we just stop doing things in the world, and we're only behind our screens and our cameras here? That just stuff that I think about from time to time.
Yeah, and it's good to know basic survival skills. It gives you some sense of peace, because if civilization does collapse, you won't be completely clueless, right? So there's a certain mental tranquility that you'll gain just knowing, that basic stuff. Also, shoot, what was I going to say? The mental tranquility. Now, on to the next thing. I lost it.
Matt, did you have a question? I know you're going to jump in there, but
no, I have like a couple random ones that I have on my mind that I don't know, just to throw them out there.
Throw them out there.
Would AI art belong in a church?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's I know there's super strict guidelines on what the definition of an icon is. I'm not familiar with all of them. Yeah. I don't think AI could technically be like write an icon. Actually, you write an icon, not draw.
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, I think if you type something in Midjourney and it produces an amazing, image of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and you make sure everything is okay and doesn't have any weird artifacts. It's like, yeah, why not just put that? I mean, I guess with church art, like ideally it should be like painted or some sort of fresco or mosaic. It should maybe be printed, I suppose, but that's not a requirement. It would be a more authentic image, but like you could have the AI make the image and then you just paint it for real, for example. So yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay. And then another random question: what would Chesterton? How would he view AI?
Yeah, that's a good question, because one of his famous quotes is, "Art is the signature of man," as in signature being like the unique sign or thing about mankind, right? It's like, well, AI isn't human, so is or is, and I just thought about this yesterday. Is AI art the digital signature of man? Maybe. I want to say yes, because again, we've made AI, and so again, it's like this very complex brush. It is an artifact. It is something we've made, and we use it to produce art. So AI art is still technically human art, but little strange, like a strange version of it, I guess. That's my current.
There's something innately in us where like we need to know that like we control the things we create. Because I mean, you look at like Frankenstein or more modern like Terminator, and there's always that scary thought, and like I feel like the human psyche that what we create somehow like dominates us. I even liken it back. I don't know if you guys remember the American folktale, John Henry, the guy who the man versus machine, the railroad worker that went up against the steam drill, and basically died proving that he could beat the steam drill, right? And who knows if that actually happened. But there was, we want that. We want to say that, like, no, we are the masters of like our own destiny, and we're not going to be controlled by a machine. So I feel like
I think maybe
it comes through with this AI discussion.
Yeah, I think it's the idea that how idolaters fail to do that. Like oftentimes they create the thing that they're worshiping, and then that's bad. So there's a good sense in us that like whatever we create, we shouldn't worship it, because if we do, then that thing has won and we've lost, sort of thing. And but anyway, so does anybody know where the word android comes from? This is something I discovered not too recently, but it's very interesting. So the concept of an android comes from this legend that of Saint Albert the Great, or Albertus Magnus, the tutor of Thomas Aquinas back in the Middle Ages. He's the patron saint of scientists. And so he apparently, according to this legend, it's almost entirely for sure not true. Albert the Great created a mechanistic artificial man. And sometimes it's described as just like a head on like a pedestal or something, but some references like, it's a full body thing where you could talk to it and it would respond, and that it could do like household tasks, and it could actually just like at least imitate reasoning and logic, like arguments. And the medieval scholastic age that Saint Albert and Aquinas was part of, they're just obsessed with logic. They were just logical syllogisms all over the place. And so from there apparently emerged this idea that you can create an artificial mind that's just based on step-by-step syllogisms and at least imitate human behavior. So now it gets more interesting because another part of the legend says that actually, no, it was run by demons. Like the thing that was animating this android, which means like human-like, was actually, just a product of demons, which is weird because Saint Albert is like a saint, right? And that Saint Thomas Aquinas eventually like smashed the android like with a one punch, either because he thought it was demonic or that it wouldn't shut up and he was just annoyed by it, or maybe both. So again, I've traced the legend back to the 1700s, but it's about Saint Albert the Great and Thomas Aquinas, who were in the 1200s, and that's where the first instance of the word android is produced. Isn't that weird? Yeah,
that's so interesting.
Yeah, that is wild. I will say, I do feel like there are certain, and I wonder if this is just how people thought back in the day as well. I can think of certain physicists who were trying to, do this thought experiment, and they said, okay, well, what if there's this demon that, would let the particle through if it had this condition, or, something like that. And so I do wonder, that's how they couldn't think of automated things.
Yeah.
Demons all the way down.
That's interesting. Yeah. So the impulse to say like, oh, it's demons when you are confronted with something that's dangerous and like powerful, right? Is something that people are very inclined to do, right? Because if something's new and you see like, ooh, this could go really bad, that sense of danger doesn't feel good. And if it's like really intimidating and powerful, then it must be like really bad. It must be a demon. Demons must be behind this somehow.
What fallacy? What logical fallacy would that be?
Yeah, that is I call it the demonic fallacy. Now it's a subcategory of
the opposite of God of the gaps? It's the demon of the gaps.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I guess it might be a sort of a false dichotomy too, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You're closer. You're a lot closer to your logic classes than I am from my philosophy degree. So that's why I wanted to run it by you, because I was I had a couple of wheels turning, but I'm like, I don't know which one that would be, but it definitely felt fallacious.
To bring it back to the beginning of this conversation, all those people who were saying that the AI actually was demonic and evil, really, they're just very traditional, right? They're medieval and they're, hey, I don't know what it is. It's got to be demons.
Yeah. It's weird. But also speaking of the Middle Ages and scholasticism, so we eventually, I think 100 years later after Albertus, was a guy named a Franciscan named Raymond Lull or Raymond Lully, and some secular computer scientists say that this medieval Franciscan, was the first one to technically invent a computer. So supposedly we've lost his device. So this Franciscan, this medieval Franciscan, apparently had some sort of clockwork device where you could input a subject of a sentence and then input a predicate of a sentence, and it would output some response or something to it. And he made it to as an apologetics tool to fight Islam. And so, but yeah, we've lost the device. But the description of this device says, according to some computer scientists, says it technically fulfills the definition of a computer. So again, this weird like medieval origin of computers and I guess AI too, which is the biggest plot twist ever. Yeah.
I mean, anybody can write a prompt. It's just back then they wouldn't have been plugging it into anything. They would have just had to have memorized, every little detail. It's like, okay, if I go this way, he's gonna go this way, and then I'm gonna counter this way, and then because they used to just sort of go back and forth like that all the time.
The medieval scholastics, they had syllogisms, right? So they knew what a good, like various good arguments would look like, and then they would just input the terms, and they would know whether the conclusion follows or not, right? And so there was a sort of input-output, at least on paper, in theory, already at work.
Very function-based, interesting.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about, the maybe the dangers of AI, all the fears that people have. I'm kind of curious too, because I kind of feel like there's like a type A type problem, type A or type B problem when people kind of approach this. So a lot of people are concerned that we start developing AI and we basically build an evil, right? Oppenheimer just came out recently, and it's the problem that he had, right? Now I've become death, destroyer of worlds. I just created this great evil. So because of that problem, they don't want the guilt of having created something that could do great harm. So the solution is then to just not get involved with AI. But then the other problem is, hey, we don't get involved with AI, and AI develops anyway, but no Christian involvement, And
exactly. That's one of the most important things, I think, in this whole discussion. Yeah. So if Christians, Catholics don't want to be involved with AI and develop it or whatever, well, then the evil people will, right? It's kind of an arms race almost, sort of, unfortunately. But in terms of the Protestant versus Catholic history, actually, I would say the Protestants jumped on the printing press faster than the Catholics did.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why the Protestants took over England. The Catholics weren't fast enough to jump onto that technology, right? So well done, Protestants. So do Christians think that, if we just boycott AI, that's the best bet? I mean, really? I mean, do you think like the atheists will stop developing AI? And this is particularly important because AI gets better because it's trained, right? So who's training it? If Midjourney learns things, right? So if it's trained in evil capacities, well, it's going to become more evil. If it's trained in good capacities, well, it's going to become more good, right? So if we just let the atheists and the deranged people nurture it, well, that's a terrible idea.
No, these are similar conversations that we're having at our day job. It's like, all right, how can we use AI to help tap the web in terms of the information that's out there to help make us better at what we do, but not share everything that we do with it so that then everybody else can learn, this is what company X is doing extremely proficiently, and then AI just basically gets all of the trade secrets from there. Like there's still an element of a human experience that AI will never have, that we can train it all we want to, but could be so many things that happen. That's why keeping the information and prompts as direct as possible, and what we're feeding it and inputting to get the right kind of outputs that we need to be proficient at whatever we're doing, it could be an extremely effective tool if wielded correctly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially AI, because that pulpit program, which I'm not entirely sure, but like, does it take a lot? Does it deal with a lot of the busy work in evangelism? Right?
Basically,
Or something?
yes. So the idea is that it's taking like a sermon and they're inputting a sermon into it. They're not pulling a sermon out of it. They input a sermon into it, and then it creates like a lot of blog post content or video content, derivative from the content. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So so the good use of AI and technology in general is that we don't have to do a lot of busy work, and we can focus more on higher activity that's more fulfilling. Right. That's when things go right. That's what technology is supposed to do.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting because I don't think, I feel like the biggest argument against it is that it's going to replace the it's going to replace the value of human work, right? And I think one of the reasons, particularly, these recent developments in AI is so scary is because, previous automations definitely replaced very kind of mechanical, what we would just consider like straight up labor. And I think people are kind of scared that AI is actually now replacing some of the creative endeavors of humanity, which is like, well, if your leisure time is not going to be spent working, then you're going to be painting. But this AI is replacing that, So I feel like
yeah, exactly right. For the longest time, people, including me, were like, well, at least AI will never be able to do art. Like, oh, never mind. But I think the how to like maintain like the humanness in art and just a lot of these things that AI seems to be taking over is that to emphasize how like it's sometimes good to handcraft things, right? It's actually good intellectually and actually at least sometimes, and it makes us more mentally healthy. So that even though we have cars, we have to remember, taking walks is healthy too. And just if we automate completely everything, we're going to be unhappy. So we can automate some things, but if we're automating too many things and we're becoming less happy, okay, we gotta just pull it back a little bit,
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Now a lot of people have said that have accused that the creators of AI are all like anti-Christian. Is that true? I don't know. Let's say it's true. Let's say they're all just militant atheists, for example, and they're the ones creating all these programs. Does that make it evil, right? And to say like, yes, it's evil because it's made by evil people, that's called the genetic fallacy. And if that reasoning is true, then a lot of beautiful churches are based off Greek architecture, and Greek architecture came from pagans, right? And that architecture originally was meant to worship demons, right? Basically false gods, right? Oh, so that has a demonic origin. So we can't
even our Christian holidays.
Yeah, exactly, right. At least, yes. Some of the liturgical calendar is a Christianization. Yeah, like some of it, not like obviously people exaggerate it, right? But yeah, there's a Christianization of these pagan traditions and making them Christian. So yeah, that's why I titled my article "Let's Baptize This Technology as Fast as Possible." Right? Not literally baptize it, right? But just because it's not, even if it's created by a bunch of evil people, that doesn't make it evil. It just needs to be baptized.
Yeah. Have you heard of Magisterium AI? I think EWTN runs it, and it's like a ChatGPT, right? It back and forth. You prompt it and it answers things for you, but it's trained on. And so I am kind of curious. I don't know in the background if it is ChatGPT that's just like pre-trained on this different data set, or if it's a whole other LLM together. But they trained it on every church document that has ever come out, and so it's pretty fun to play with. I like that we can. If I don't know who created it, but if someone's watching this and they created it or they know who created it, we'll have you on here and talk about it. But
absolutely,
so that is a fun one. I am curious as we're talking about this though. How would you recommend, if you could tell everybody in the whole world, not just these technology enthusiasts, how should the common person? How should the church approach AI? Should they learn it, like you said, with ChatGPT, where they learn it enough that they can pick it out and call it out? The demonology approach, where you got to study it so you can call it out. Should everybody be using this?
Good question.
How should we approach this?
Yeah, no, it totally depends on who you are, right? Because I wouldn't say like everybody should study demonology. I wouldn't say that. If you are in some sort of spiritual ministry, okay, yeah, definitely have some familiarity with what how demons act. But yeah, if you're low IQ, right, and you have a menial job, I don't know if you should study demonology. I don't know if you should even do a bunch of AI even. So it really depends on what your vocation is, probably. But at the very least, yeah, it's not intrinsically evil. Don't be afraid to at least experiment with it in a non-sinful way. Definitely, if you're in academia, definitely play around with ChatGPT, especially if you're grading papers. Yeah, I mean, even when you're even a writer, right? You can tell ChatGPT, like, how would you write this scene? And you might get ideas. And oftentimes the scene might be not perfectly written, but you can say like, oh yeah, that's a good way to phrase at least this sentence. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
People just need to disassociate, like, especially in our circles, like, it's not a Ouija board. So that's the thing. Like, if people can disassociate that, in terms, I feel like I said, as long as it's a tool being wielded for good and help, flush out ideas, helps a lot.
Yeah. And yes, I mean, if you can use ChatGPT and whatnot, even I guess Midjourney or whatever, as a Ouija board, it depends on your intention, right? If you're trying to, say like your intention of using it, like I want, the universe or a demon to give me an answer after I type in this, right? If that's your intention, okay, then you are using it as a Ouija board. But yeah, you can do that with dice too, right? And just
flipping a coin.
Flipping a coin. Yeah, exactly. You use all sorts of weird stuff for divination purposes. So yeah, it depends on your intention. If you have a bad intention when you use AI, well, then that's bad.
What about we'll say talking to the dead, where I say, hey, reply in the style of, I know that's kind of a lot of people like to do that. And so it's like, oh, it's like I'm chatting with Chesterton or the saint or whoever else.
I mean, if you're not literally trying to do necromancy, then I think that can be fine, right? Okay. In fact, that can be that can be fun in a even humorous way. Like, yeah, right. Write something ridiculous in the style of Thomas Aquinas or something, right? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. Usually Riverside is telling me how long the podcast has been running, but I don't have the timer for some reason. But I feel like we've been running for about an hour. We're
over an hour, and
okay.
We value Julian's time, and we appreciate him coming on the podcast. I'm of course gonna leave something in the description for the Reddit page where all the art is getting posted, because it's really cool. But where else can people follow some of your works, some of your articles, etc.? Anything else we should look for what else you have coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I have the Instagram equivalent of Generation of the Saints. So
perfect.
Generation of the Saints. I only post I post fewer things on there, but the main thing, I guess, would be my website, which is thomism.org. So Thomism is the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas. Managed to get that domain name. So yeah, that's spelled THOMISM.org. And
we'll leave a link for that down in the description too. So yeah,
there's just some random stuff, even some not that philosophical stuff. Like I have my dream journal on there. That's proceed at your own risk or whatever. But it's really disconnected from all social media. I need to update it, but I'm lazy. But that would be the main thing. I'm trying to think of anything else. Yeah.
You on Twitter?
Sometimes keeping the main thing is what matters, and we appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us, and we look forward to seeing what else the generation of saints will come out with in the future. So appreciate you hopping on the podcast with us, Julian.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, this was great. This was fun.
Thanks.
God bless you.